Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a deeply complex history that's honestly been making massive headlines lately. We're looking at a story that bridges a super dark era in the 1990s with a modern day controversy playing out right now on our streaming screens. At its core, this is a narrative about a hidden human tragedy, tens of thousands of missing people, a massive state cover up, and the wild, almost unbelievably simple investigation that brought it all to light. It's really a fascinating look at how history gets recorded, how it gets aggressively challenged, and how one guy's search for the truth changed, well, absolutely everything. So, let's start with a staggering, almost incomprehensible number 127. That is the exact number of cuts the censor board demanded for a highly anticipated biographical film starring Diljit Dosanjh. And look, we aren't just talking about tweaking a few lines of dialogue or cutting a violent scene here. We're talking about sweeping demands to alter the fundamental reality of the story. They wanted to change the names of real police forces, actual geographic districts, and get this, they even demanded changing the surname of the real-life main character. This wasn't just editing, this was a mandate to literally erase a real identity from a historical narrative. That number right there tells us we're dealing with a nerve-striking piece of history that someone, somewhere, is deeply afraid of. And the journey of this film has been just as turbulent as the history it's trying to show. Originally, it was titled Punjab 95, but it immediately faced intense objections. It was eventually renamed Sutlej, just to, appease the censorship boards. After a totally exhausting legal battle just to exist, the movie finally premiered uncut on the Z5 platform on July 3, 2006. But man, the victory was short-lived. Literally 48 hours later, on July 5th, the film was completely and mysteriously pulled down. Reportedly, this was due to concerns from security agencies about how the film's contents might be perceived. So, this modern attempt at erasure begs an immediate, vital question. What exactly is the history that the system finds so deeply difficult to show? Who was this man, and what exactly did he uncover that still echoes so loudly and poses such a threat decades later? Section 1. Disappearances in 1990s Punjab. To understand the censorship, we actually have to transport ourselves back to the grim reality of the 90s. Following Operation Blue Star and the tragic events of 1984, Punjab entered a prolonged period of really intense insurgency. During this turbulent decade, an unofficial but widely recognized policy of a bullet for a bullet took hold. Basically, the police and security forces were granted immense, sweeping powers to detain suspects for almost any reason under the broad banner of counterterrorism. For a regular citizen on the street, this meant living in a constant state of tension. A police van could just pull up in the middle of the night, or even broad daylight, and take someone away without a warrant, without a charge, no questions asked. The lines of legality weren't just blurred, they were virtually non-existent. To truly grasp the human cost of those sweeping powers, we really need to look past the macro-level history and focus on individual lives. Take the agonizing story of Pragat Singh. He wasn't just a faceless statistic. He was a 25-year-old dairy owner and the brother of a celebrated national sporting hero. In September 1990, he was picked up by the police. For 2 whole years, his father went on this frantic, soul-crushing search. He visited every hospital, knocked on the doors of every police station, and scoured cremation grounds, only to have every single door slammed in his face. Then, out of nowhere, over 2 years later, in November 1992, police casually declared Pragat dead in a supposed armed shootout. But his body never returned to the family. He wasn't in any hospital logs or official records. He hadn't just died, he had simply evaporated from official existence. Section 2. Uncovering the secret cremations. Pragat's story tragically wasn't unique, which leads us to the core of our explainer, the unprecedented investigation into illegal cremations in Punjab during the 90s. Enter Jaswant Singh Khalra. Now, he wasn't a militant, he wasn't a soldier, or a high-ranking politician. He was just a bank director in Amritsar and an incredibly dedicated human rights activist. Khalra had this singular, brilliant realization. You might be able to hide a person, but you can't easily hide the physical logistics of destroying a human body. Think about it. Bodies require a specific, calculable amount of firewood to burn. So Khalra realized that to find the missing youth, he shouldn't be looking at heavily guarded police stations. He needed to look at municipal bureaucracy. He meticulously began examining firewood purchasing logs and cremation registers at state-run crematoriums. By calculating the massive tonnage of firewood purchased by the municipality and comparing it against official death records, he found a massive, undeniable discrepancy. The math itself proved the cover-up.
When Khalra applied this meticulous methodology locally, the data he uncovered was just chillin'. The firewood discrepancies lined up perfectly with thousands of secret cremations. In the town of Petit alone, he found records for 538 bodies burned and officially labeled as unidentified. In Tarn Taran, the number was around 700. In the Amritsar district, nearly 2,000 bodies. But here's the absolute most sinister detail of all, hidden right in the margins of those municipal logs. By carefully cross-referencing records, Khalra discovered that many of the bodies being burned under the label of unidentified actually had their full, known names and home addresses jotted down by the crematorium workers. The authorities knew exactly who they were burning, yet the families waiting at home were kept completely in the dark.
And Khalra didn't stop there. By taking this incredibly dense, localized data from just a few districts and extrapolating his findings regarding firewood usage across the entire state of Punjab, he made a horrifying assertion. Based on the hard logistics of the cover-up, he estimated that over 25,000 Sikhs could have been illegally killed and secretly cremated by the state apparatus. 25,000 lives, erased without a trial, without a judge, and without a trace. Now, when Khalra took these explosive, mathematically backed findings to the press in January 1995, it sparked a massive clash of public narratives. We want to look at both sides here impartially. On one hand, you had Khalra boldly asserting a state-sponsored system of extrajudicial executions, claiming they completely bypassed identification rules to secretly burn victims. On the other hand, the Director General of Police, KPS Gill, vehemently denied any such atrocities. The official counter-narrative claimed that these missing youths weren't dead at all. Gill argued they had voluntarily used fake documents and assumed names to flee to foreign countries, and that Khalra was maliciously blaming the police for what were basically voluntary economic disappearances. So those were the firm battle lines drawn in 1995. Section 3. The Price of Truth. Khalra's steadfast refusal to back down brought immense pressure from the very system he was exposing. And the events that followed represent a terrifying irony. The man who dedicated his life to investigating forced disappearances was disappeared himself. And this wasn't done in the dead of night. On the morning of September 6, 1995, in broad daylight while he was just washing his car outside his own home, eyewitnesses watched as a black van pulled up. He was brazenly abducted without a warrant by armed Punjab police officers. Over the following days, he was secretly held at various police stations. We later learned the grim reality. He was severely beaten, interrogated, and ultimately murdered, and his body was quietly disposed of in a canal. The system had effectively executed the very man who was giving a voice to their previous victims. Following his murder, the cover-up attempts were swift and brutal. The system investigated itself, and anyone attempting to pierce that veil faced extreme danger. Witnesses who saw the abduction were threatened or beaten. Journalists looking into the story were intimidated into silence. International organizations thoroughly documented this extreme suppression. Amnesty International even released a report that rightfully called the official handling of Khalra's disappearance a complete, quote, mockery of justice. Section 4. A legacy of justice. Because despite the terror in his tragic murder, the empirical truth he uncovered couldn't just be erased from the ledgers. The ultimate vindication of his work actually came from the top. Following a direct order from the courts, India's premier federal investigative agency, the Central Bureau of Investigation, stepped in, and their formal conclusion was a massive turning point. They confirmed that police had indeed unlawfully cremated 2,097 people in just the Tarn Taran district. The federal agency had completely validated the local bank director's firewood math. It proved definitively that Khalra wasn't just guessing, and he definitely wasn't exaggerating. His methodology was exactly right, and his findings were entirely accurate. The fight for ultimate accountability then fell to his wife, Paramjit Kaur, who embarked on a grueling 15-year legal battle. I mean, think about the immense courage it takes for a civilian to fight the entire police apparatus in court for over a decade. In 1996, the CBI recommended prosecution, but it took until 2005 for 6 officials to actually be convicted of Khalra's murder. The High Court extended these to life sentences in 2007. And finally, in 2011, the Supreme Court of India upheld those life sentences, issuing scathing criticisms of the atrocities committed by the police. A civilian had successfully taken down the architects of extrajudicial executions. The ripples of Khalra's ultimate sacrifice are still deeply felt globally today. He successfully shifted a massive denied human rights crisis from whispered rumor into documented, undeniable history. Today, there's literally a park in Fresno, California that bears his name. His brilliant investigative methods involving public records are studied in college curriculums around the world. He represents the unyielding demand for institutional accountability. And this draws a direct line back to why his story, adapted into the 2026 film Satluj, is still viewed as so profoundly sensitive and dangerous that it was yanked from streaming within 48 hours. The truth he uncovered simply refuses to stay buried. From the literal erasure of human identities in the crematoriums of the 1990s to the digital erasure of a biographical film from our streaming platforms today, I want to leave you with this final, lingering thought to reflect on. When the system itself is the accused, where do you go for justice? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I encourage you to always keep questioning and keep learning.